I'm going to call them Sardaukar. I know people will berate me, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to call the Sardaukar. I heard an interview where Frank said it that way, so people are going to challenge me. But calm down. For the purposes of this video, they're Sardaukar. Secondly, the video I'm responding to does have a kind of political agenda. It's concerned with social justice warrior stuff, whatever. I don't care. I'll deal with the politics in due time down the road. But here I'm going to concentrate on the lore issue, and I think he raises a lot of nonsense issues, but he did raise a few issues with the worms and the Sardaukar, and I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. Now, he's mainly analyzing the trailer, and that's very dangerous. Presumably now it's outmoded with the film being finally released, but I do think he raised some interesting issues, so we're going to let the person speak and then respond to it.
Over the past 50 years, they have turned the practical effects of the sandworms from the 80s into a butthole. Is this the imagination level of modern directors? The original design was based on real worms, and as you notice, these worms have mouths. These new worms look like they will suck up sand like a vacuum with no vent for the sand to disperse. And to use the excuse that it's just fiction doesn't work. In fiction, what is happening in the scene or in a book has to make sense, whether it is biological, technical, astronomical, or magical. This vision Paul is having in the future makes no sense when it comes to the worm in the background. The worms attack anything in their path, and yet we see Paul and the Fremen fighting in the foreground. The worm would attack them, Paul included. The Fremen do ride worms, however. That doesn't change the fact that this is stupid to fight right in front of them. Another bizarre choice here is the Power Ranger costumes in the battle they are wearing. This is more signs of modern glitz and glamour, but with no substance or reason. This battle would attract the worms, which you would argue that is what happened in the scene. However, every action the characters take is calculated, and Paul wouldn't be so stupid to attract a worm in the middle of a fight. The writers of this movie have no idea about anything of Frank Herbert's Dune.
Okay, so some people may be a little confused. So, what exactly is the issue? Well, essentially, and I do think he's correct, the way it's done in the novel, you have to be very careful on Arrakis. Like, if you make certain noises or movements, you attract the sandworms. So, he's pointing out a contradiction, namely, Paul can't be fighting the Sardaukar in that sequence because if he is, the sandworms are going to come and kill him and the other soldiers. So, what is occurring? Well, I think at the most basic level, he's either not paying attention or he's joking because I thought it was pretty clear this is a vision. This is not really happening. And this is partly confirmed in some of the movie reviews. We're getting a lot of visions from Paul. So presumably this is a possible future. He is fighting the Sardaukar. Those appear to be Sardaukar. And it's essentially him in gold armor. So we can tell this is in the future. This is kind of like a what if situation. What if I succeeded and I now fight the Sardaukar? But that still keeps the worm issue, right? Well, maybe. Another possibility is, are they even on Arrakis? This could be Paul in the jihad mode, because in terms of, all right, this is minor spoilers for Dune Messiah if you haven't read it, so just want to forewarn people. But if you go with the story beyond the first novel, essentially a jihad is unleashed which kills billions of people. And presumably, maybe this is a snippet from that story where Paul is leading his army and just mowing down the Sardaukar. Now, that still doesn't technically make sense because the way I understood it at the end of the novel, essentially he has a cold peace with the Emperor. They've agreed to a kind of balance of power, so presumably the Sardaukar are now loyal to him. So why would he be eliminating them? Unclear. Okay. But we don't technically know if this is on Arrakis or even if this is real, so it still seems like a nitpick. But the worms have been changed. The worms don't look like they did in the Lynch version or even in the book. Something is going on, so it is possible they contradicted themselves or just they got something wrong with the lore. That is possible because you got to be honest. I mean, Eric Roth and the other writer, John, may have obviously read the book, but did they really concentrate on the mythology to the level of the sandworms? Maybe not. But I want to be careful before we say they just totally messed up and contradicted themselves. But I guess the best guessing I'm going to make is they're not on Arrakis. This is just a vision. This is not meant to be real. This is a possible future. There is no contradiction. But we still have a problem. What if this is on Arrakis? Even if this is a possible future, the sandworms should be coming to kill them. How do you explain that? If it is on Arrakis, and if that's where the vision is taking place. I would say, yeah, that's very curious. I guess to be consistent, maybe this is at a point in the story where Paul is transforming enough of Arrakis that the sandworms have either been diminished or dying off. That's possible. We don't know how far into the future this is. It has to be in the future because it has blue eyes. So he's been exposed to spice and he's been taking the spice if he has blue eyes. But yes, he is right. If this is on Arrakis, even if this is a vision of the future, unless we get more information, this doesn't make sense. The sandworms should be coming to kill them. So either they've radically changed the worms that they don't really respond to bodily movements or noises in the same way. But that's a huge problem, because if that's the case, then a lot of the plot is not going to make sense, because the reason the Harkonnens and or the Emperor don't get rid of Paul is because the sandworms are providing basically kind of a natural shield to the Fremen and him, because they just can't get to them. The sandworms are just too powerful and too dangerous, so they have to take them into consideration. But if the sandworms don't really respond to a battle scene, then why wouldn't the Harkonnens just come and wipe them out? If the sandworms aren't going to come, then this is making the Harkonnens look like a complete bunch of idiots. So this is one of the things, when you adapt something, you want to be careful about these details, because this is going to cause problems with the story. It's not a problem with the book, because Frank Herbert took a lot of time and care to make sure these questions were answered. And I'll say this, even the sci-fi episode talks about this. They talk about, no, we have to work a certain way in the desert. You have to learn how the Fremen work, because we know how to work with the sandworms. Otherwise, you're going to put yourself in danger. The Sardaukar don't know this, right? They don't have the local knowledge. They are stupidly just exposing themselves to danger. But at the basic level, the Emperor and the Harkonnens do know the sandworms are there, and they're just really difficult to work with. But if they've changed the sandworms a lot, then yeah, it does open up a possible plot contradiction, because it's like, well, if they could kill Paul and not attract the worms, why don't they do that? So again, we're going to have to wait for the movie to be more widely available to experts, because so far fans have seen it and a lot of critics have seen it, but so far, honestly, the critics who have seen it don't seem to know the books too well, and they don't know the mythology too well, so they may not have picked up on this contradiction. But he is correct. They've definitely changed how the worms look. Have they changed the worms at a fundamental level? That we don't know, so that's unclear. So if he's correct, yeah, the Sardaukar sequence does not make a whole lot of sense. I would assume it's one of those possibilities. Maybe they're not on Arrakis. Maybe this is during the middle of the Jihad. There's a lot of other possibilities. But yes, if he is correct, then yeah, how are they fighting and the worms aren't coming? That's strange. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But if he did catch this contradiction, then good on him. I don't necessarily agree with the political point of view he has, but he's pointed out something real. So congratulations on that. All right, and this has been a look at the Dune lore through the sandworms. Thank you for listening.